Hi everybody, Shelly here. Are you starting your portrait paintings using charcoal or pencil sketches? Well, today I'm going to show you how you can do it with walnut oil and transparent oxide brown oil paints. You can avoid the sketching process and jump right into painting. I'm going to show you today step by step how you do it. I work in a toxic-free studio. Walnut oil is my go-to medium. So you can see me here putting a little bit on a cut up piece of cloth. It's a polyester fabric. Next, I rub a very thin layer across my wooden panel. I'm using transparent oxide brown oil paint, but you could use any transparent oil color that you like for your underpainting. And since I have a vertical palette, I'm going to utilize the Walnut Oil Gel just out of convenience. I'll also be using my trusty proportion tool. I like to mix a little bit of my paint with the Walnut Oil Gel, but then I'll leave the pure pigment paint at the top of my pile, and I will be dipping into both. I've gridded my reference image, which you see here. I'm going to be focusing on the horizontal and the vertical line that's going directly through the head. Here's a look at how I grid all of my painting surfaces and the reference material. This black circle shows where our head will be oriented on our canvas. I'm starting the painting here with the shadow line across the forehead. My reference image is set up so that I can do one-to-one measuring using my proportion tool. So with the horizontal line on one tip of the proportion tool, I can see where I need to place the shadow line. Using the shadow line, I will find the inner corner of the left eyebrow. Remember, this works with the proportion tool because I have the image on my computer monitor at the exact same size as the head that I'm painting on my canvas. This makes measuring so simple and easy, and if you don't have a proportion tool, you can use your thumb on the tip of a paintbrush. The grid underneath the painting serves as a sort of armature for the portrait. The placement of all the features in our portrait can be found using just this one vertical and one horizontal line. No further gridding is really required. I decided to start with the top of the forehead because it was closest to that horizontal grid line, and it just made sense to make sure that I had placed the top of the head on the canvas exactly where I know I wanted it. I played around with the composition in Photoshop, so I already have predetermined how I want this composition to lay out, and that grid line that I can see on my reference material is showing me exactly where to place my head and features. This is what allows me to complete my underpainting following the selective start method. See here how the walnut oil allows me to remove paint by wiping it away with a cloth. Do you feel like you need a little extra help? Well, I've got you. In the description below this video, I have a link to a free 3 ways to start a portrait painting. And it's going to walk you through each of those 3 ways, and even this way that you're going to see today, it's going to even give you more information on painting and underpainting in this sort of selective start manner, brush stroke by brush stroke. And did I mention it's free? So make sure you grab that in the description below. I do a lot of measuring and remeasuring, especially in these beginning stages, because everything I lay down is going to build off of the thing that came before it. There'll be some comparative measuring that happens, so to use comparative measuring well, the things you're comparing need to be put in the correct spot. I've also decided to work more here with the shadow side of the face, the left side. There is a window to the right, and the natural light is coming in on the right side of our sitter. I like starting with the shadow shapes. It really helps to kind of form the likeness, and you feel like the 3D volume of the portrait is coming to life and making more sense, and the shadow shapes really help you see if you're getting a likeness early on. Also, the transparent nature of this type of paint being placed on top of a slippery surface, because we did coat it very lightly with some walnut oil, it makes the paint here feel kind of like I imagine watercolor painting to be like. And I'm really enjoying using kind of an older round brush just to get some interesting marks especially since our subject is a cowboy and he has some beautiful wrinkles and things that I really want to explore throughout this painting. I like to see a lot of texture in the skin of this portrait, and I can get some of that already started here in this underpainting utilizing this transparent paint and this crazy frayed round brush that you see here. Also, I think I'm going to be allowing a good bit of the shadow that I put in now to show through and stand as the shadow for the portrait. The lighter areas of the face I plan to build up with more opaque flesh tones, and the beautiful transparent nature in the shadow areas I hope to preserve. Now is the time to play with mark making. Try different brushes, use older brushes, newer brushes. Here's my favorite comber brush. This is a larger one, and I'm just kind of knocking things back. I put down initially, and I'm going to go back over some of the areas and bring in some of that texture again. But in the underpainting stage that you see now, this is a great time to play. If there's something that you put down and you don't like it, it is easily wiped away, and you just repaint that area. Have you ever gotten to a point and you finished your painting and you're like, something's just off? I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it. Well, that means you need a critique. I offer critique packages. You can learn more about them at sjcportraitcourse.com. And with a critique, you really will understand what it is that you need to do to make it a better, more masterful painting. And the critiques that I provide are recorded so you can watch them over and over again, and then hopefully utilize the training information that you'll gain from that critique towards making better paintings in the future. So again, you can check that out at sjcportraitcourse.com. Now back to the video. Here I'm using that vertical grid line that's running right down the nose. You can see it on the computer image to find the outer left corner of the left eye. Now I'm going to use that upper horizontal grid line to find the bottom of the nose. Here the center grid line shows me just how far away the left side of the nostril is from that center line. I recommend that you try out different brushes and you really play and enjoy this process. Here you can see I'm going pretty slow. I didn't want you to think I was painting as fast as this the whole time, because I'm not. The whole entire painting process you see here that's going to end up with just the forehead moving beyond the nose a little bit has taken me just about a little over an hour to complete. But I am really taking my time and playing with the mark making and focusing on the values. Where are the darks in my picture? Where are the mid values? And where are the lights? I try to keep it simple and just look at the values as if there are three: a highlight or a light, a middle value, and a shadow or a dark. That's it. Before I go any further down the face, I want to establish where this hat's going to be. It really will give me a better feel for if things are lining up correctly. Even though I'm using the grid and the proportion tools, I still like to make a visual decision on whether things are working out or not. While I do use the grid line a lot to find the proportions of my hat, I'm also looking at what part of the face do the edges of the hat line up with. Okay, I feel like I have enough of the hat down where I can move on and continue with the right side, the light side of the portrait. So here I am finding the inner right corner of the eye. I'm using that vertical grid line, and now I use the horizontal grid line to make sure that I started that dot down the face far enough. So I checked its vertical and horizontal coordinates on the face using those two grid lines. And I'm just going to continue to kind of build that eye out, and I am going to measure a lot during this process. The cool thing with using this transparent paint and the walnut oil is you don't have to keep adding paint. You can just push some of the paint around that you already put down. I don't even have to dip my brush into any sort of medium. I don't dip it into any extra walnut oil. I actually wipe a little bit of the paint off of the brush and then just use it to push the paint where I want it to go. Now, I've remeasured here based on that initial spot that we know is in the correct spot. We've measured it vertically and horizontally, and now I'm seeing that my eye was a little bit too wide, and that's a comparative type measuring. So I am really depending on that point, that inner eye point on the right eye, to be in the correct spot in order for that comparative measure to work and make sense. So continued measuring has showed me I need to take away a little bit of that outer point, which is going to cause me to have to move the pupil iris over towards the center of the face a little bit. And since we're using the walnut oil with transparent paint, that is super easy to do. Absolutely no problem at all. I really do love this starting method. There should be zero fear involved with doing underpainting in this way. Now, when you're putting down pencil or charcoal, it is very difficult to erase your lines fully. Even if you're using the lightest touch and it's like a vine charcoal, and that's supposed to be really easy to remove, I still see the lines underneath, and sometimes they show through on your painting. With this method, the paint that's put down and then pushed around with the walnut oil does not show through in a way that's going to be obstructive or, confusing in your painting. I like to use a soft brush like you see here to knock back some of the ridges on the paint. I want the underpainting to be pretty smooth. I don't want to have to fight with any ridges of brush strokes left in the paint. So I keep things really pretty smooth in this part of the painting process. Still using that center vertical grid line to make sure that my left eye is placed correctly, and I'm just getting some of that negative shape. This is the white of the eye, which is on the shadow side, so I don't want it to be very light. And this is an underpainting where I am trying to make sure that I get the value pretty close to correct that I am putting in here. I don't want to have to think about value very much when I'm adding the color. So here you can see comparative measuring happening. I'm checking the inner corners of the eyes. I'm checking the inner corner of the irises to the outer corners of the irises. Lots of comparative measuring happening. That works so well when you have one-to-one measuring where the image on the computer screen matches what you're painting on your canvas. I love this kneaded eraser for removing paint. It makes a beautiful mark to create a highlight or any area that you need very specifically chiseled out where you want the paint completely removed. You can also use a dry paintbrush, a cloth, a finger always works well. Sometimes I use a Q-tip, and even bird feathers work well. Looks like my shadow shape is encroaching a little bit on the right side of the nose where the highlight is, so I'm just wiping that away with my finger, and then I'll remeasure. So I'm looking to find where that shadow shape goes. I'm not measuring for any one specific part of a feature. I'm actually just looking at that larger shadow shape that the right eye is creating. Notice the value of the whites of the eyes. They're pretty dark. They're nowhere near as light as the highlights on the right side of the nose and the right side plane of the face. Now I'm just going in and playing with some of the textures that I'm seeing there on the forehead and just really kind of fine-tuning the details that I have in there so far. Still working with my grid lines. I'm going to use the horizontal grid line to find the top of this little cheek shadow here on the right side of the face. Now I'm going to check to see if what I laid down on the canvas already is correct. And it looks like it is. So that's something I like to try to do. I like to put it down on the canvas sometimes and then check to see if I did it correctly. And now I'm checking it against that shadow line that the hat and the forehead make, and it looked correct. I'm checking it from the vertical center grid line, and here the same thing on the painting. And each time I checked it 3 different ways, and each of those 3 different ways showed it done correctly. Here's where I ended up after about an hour, and I will continue this same process while I build out the rest of this portrait painting. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.